my screen here. Cool. For those in the room, thanks for joining. We have a special guest today, which we're very, very excited about. And also, as a reminder, we are live streaming, we're recording. So this is going to go out to a ton of people in the SaaStr community across the SaaStr universe. So there's a lot we want to cover today on the current state of events in 2023. Man, a lot has changed. So I'm so glad to be joined by my dear friend Julius, who is an event influencer and now founder of Boldpush. Julius, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Oh my God, a dream come true.
Well, thanks for doing this. I know we've been chatting. We just met up at Shop Talk in Vegas, and we were chatting about events. And I was like, oh, we should do this on a webinar and get it out there more in the world. So I'm super excited. For those who don't know you, tell the folks a little bit about yourself and how you've come into our ecosystem throughout the years, but like, for those who don't know you, what should they know about you?
Well, I've been running the SaaStr of events. I would call it that way, a website called EventMB, for 15 years, a company I sold in 2019 to Skift, a larger media company. And as part of that, I've discussed sort of trends and the use of technology in events for a while. And I've done a ton of research. And more recently, I've worked with Swapcard and Hopin. I was VP of marketing for them. I'm sure a lot of people in the SaaStr community remember that. So yeah, and more recently, like a year from now, I've been consulting and researching even more for tech companies and large events. And yeah, help them out with figuring out the hell that is going on.
Yeah, a lot of things. We'll start to dive in here because let's help folks set the stage on events. I know SaaStr is deep into event production. We've got our Europa event coming up in about 2 months. You help consult on a lot of events. You attend a lot of events. So you have this. I pulled a lot of your data and some of your tweets. So this week happened just a few weeks ago, right, where it was this crazy $6 billion week in the events like tech industry. Give us a little bit of a snapshot of like just what you're seeing overall in events, right? Because pre 2020, I feel like events were so hot. There was like 5 events a day, and then obviously pandemic happened and we were slowed and we all went virtual. But now it feels like in person is back. But just want to get your take on that because you do all the research, you have all the data. Like, what are you seeing out there of like events being back?
Totally. And, it's been crazy, right? The roller coaster that we've seen since the pandemic, a lot of event technology companies raising billions essentially for virtual events. And then all of a sudden, by the end of 2021, things started to slow down. And then they started to tank dramatically. Several companies went through 1, 2, 3 rounds of layoffs and sort of with this high valuations that they had to justify. At the same stage, we saw a lot of that driven by the rise of in-person events. That was clear. Like everybody wanted to go back and meet in person. And I feel we're still experiencing that pendulum sort of swinging back towards in-person. That's what's happening. But it's happening at a rate and with a strength that nobody expected within the events industry. Everybody was like hoping for that to happen, but with this strength, we haven't seen it. And like most of in-person events companies, so companies that plan hundreds of events a year, companies that have millions of attendees, they've had the best year ever in their history, sometimes in 7 years. So this is like crazy. This week you're showing here to the audience is just a week where there was like a major acquisition, Blackstone buying Cvent, after negotiation, turning down an offer, and then like 3 companies in person, PRA, Tarsus, and Hive Group were acquired, 6.2 billion worth, in a moment where in an area where essentially there was no deal making at all, especially in technology. You know how tough and rough it is out there. So yeah, it's kind of a counter signal. I do calls every day with investment firms looking at in-person event tech, in person specifically. So this is to set the scene. In person is booming.
Yeah, I think that's such a crazy stat to think about. I mean, we've seen it in other events, you know, it's just across the board that we've gone to, right? Like Shop Talk had, I think, 10,000 people there. You know, there was, I don't know, probably that many more people at the Taylor Swift concert that weekend. Like, it is an event, right? I'm like, I think you tweeted this too. You're like, it is an event. You know, Coachella is the next 2 weekends after this weekend. You know, I think they're expecting back more than what they had last year now that it's back. Like, I think just overall, right, it's a good overall sign in the industry that like events are just overall kind of generally back, even if maybe on the SaaS side, the pendulum, I think exactly to your point, the pendulum has been a little bit slower, but it's definitely like swinging in the right direction, specifically in SaaS.
Well, obviously, tech has like more complications, right? With all the layoffs,
Yeah,
the vertical of tech is struggling a little bit more, but demand is there. I mean, if you see what happened in San Francisco
totally.
last week with Woodstock AI, like just a founder sending a message saying, "I'm coming over. Should we meet up?" And then 5,000 people show up. That tells you a story about the demand for in person.
Yeah, it's we'll talk about it a bit more, but I think it's helpful for folks here, hopefully, to help set the stage. You know, a lot of our sponsors are tuning into this who either are sponsors of SaaStr or thinking about sponsoring SaaStr or do their own events as well, right, at various sizes. So I think this is all helpful for them to know. We talked about it a little bit, but I want to get your take on this too of event attendance, right? Because I feel like so much has changed around attending an event now. Whereas I feel like back in the day, it was very much like, okay, everyone else is going. I got to be there because everyone else is going. Even if I just go for like an hour, I'm going to go show my face and do the whole thing because it's the thing to do. I feel like now so much around attending events has changed, and we'll try and break it down a little bit. But one thing we've seen, and you've just touched on as well, is like events are seeing a strong surge in attendance now because that's where people want to connect, right? We're still mostly, you know, distributed teams. I know there's some people starting to go back to the office, but it's not every day. A lot of us still conduct most of our business on, you know, Zoom or virtually. And for SaaStr, we've seen this interesting surge in attendance, and especially around teams. So I wanted to ask you about that bit of your take, because you see this at a much broader scale, right? Of with all the events that you work on and just in the industry, like we've seen this crazy pattern of, I think you and I were chatting about this before the webinar, of like SaaStr has seen more buyers coming to its shows than literally ever before. I was like, this is the year of like the CTO and the CFO attending SaaStr with the rest of their team. But are you seeing that across the board? Like, should we get used to that? Like, is that the new just pattern for attending? Is like you need to bring your buyer now versus they used to just be able to like, you know, give them a report back in the office?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. I wish things were simpler in terms of saying, this is like a trend that is happening across the board. Every single in-person event is
Yeah.
growing. That's not the case. Actually, it's very
Yeah.
patchy. So you see some events that are growing
Mm,
super fast with a lot of demand, and like some other events that are reporting attendance as a problem, and they're not able to pull
got
in
it.
attendees, right? That has a lot to do with the type of event, in my opinion. This is like,
Mhm.
my thesis. I mean, there's no proof of that in the data, at least yet, because this is like a 6 months trend that we're looking at.
Sure.
So, this is what happened. So the more business focused, the more networking focused events like SaaStr, where the right people to make business are going to be there. And actually, on the other hand, the people that want to do business, the investors, the C-level suite,
Yes.
they can deal with all the information that is happening. Obviously, deal making to a certain extent on Zoom probably is evolving as well. And so all of a sudden, they're saying, okay, I have no time. I'll just go to SaaStr and make it happen there. So
Yep.
that means also that they cannot do it for all the events in SaaS. So the smaller SaaStr type of events are going to suffer, right? So that's what is happening because like people are also evaluating, okay, I'll go to the big event, to the main event of my
Mhm.
category, but I want to attend every event that is out there.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I mean, we're lucky in that SaaStr has scale, and so we've gotten really good attendance rates for, Europe is running at a crazy attendance rate right now, annuals ahead of where it was last year. But yeah, to your point, I totally get that of like we've been really lucky in that standpoint of like, because we do so much else of like newsletters, media, SaaStr.com, Twitter, like our community is quite large. And so I think you're right. What you're seeing kind of ties to what we've seen in more buyers and teams coming to SaaStr, because people are, when they're tightening up budgets, you're like, all right, instead of going to 3 events, I'm going to pick 1. So we've gotten lucky that we happen to be one of those events. But I think it's helpful for our sponsors just to know in general, because I think customer events have gotten a lot harder because of, I've got some slides in here later, but because of all the things around inflation of like just being, it's not even a theory anymore. It's like everything is more expensive. Like production costs are more expensive, venue costs are more expensive, doing an international event like we're doing in London is more expensive because the dollar is weaker than the pound. Like everything has gotten crazy more expensive on the organizers and hosts, and even for our sponsors out there who have, if you're thinking of doing your own customer event this year, like it's just gotten a lot harder to do those kinds of things in person at scale. So I do think it's crazy kind of what we're seeing now in like the surge and like the bigger events, and it's gotten maybe a bit tougher for some of the smaller ones.
Absolutely. No, you're totally right.
This is one of your data points. I think this is interesting just for our folks to know. We still do a lot of virtual, right? Like we're literally on this webinar. We do workshop Wednesday. In person is obviously being virtual, but to your point, right? Like not everyone can, I think, host these big at scale events. And so they're still doing some virtual, like just talk me through the latest, like what are you seeing now on this whole like in person is clearly being virtual for like a lot of things, but like have you seen, things where virtual still can work, or like have people just abandoned it now and we're all just trying to do in-person events even though they're expensive? Like what have you seen?
Yeah, this is a tough question. So this is a data point from actually SaaStr Meetings Pulse survey, which is like a great resource. It's a free to download report. If you want to dig deeper, definitely search it up. It's always like updated every quarter, and it gives great perspective on what's happening in the industry. So this is like from a couple of quarters ago, and it's essentially saying that almost like 50% of event planners are not planning virtual events anymore. So this is what is happening. Okay, this is a fairly complex subject, but I'll try to make it super simple for everybody. So core event planners, people that plan events, this is what they do. That's their product. So we're not talking about corporate events, corporate, CMOs doing their marketing programs, or so independent event planners and all of that. They've moved away from virtual events. They have gone back to in person. They used virtual events during the pandemic because they couldn't do anything else. They said no, they moved on, essentially. That's it. It's done. So all of that part of the market is essentially gone. There's not a lot of that happening anymore. Now, on the CMO front, but we realized that there's a better version of a webinar that you can do with virtual event platforms if you're intentional about it, right? So there's more that you can do, especially with a marketing purpose in mind, promoting your in-person event, having programs that sort of lead up to as we're doing today, in a sense, right? So that makes sense. And a lot of people realize that. But obviously, there's probably 1/10 of the demand that we had during the pandemic. I think we're back to what the demand was for webinars, probably 20% more of that, right? But not 1,000% more of that. And there's 10 times more the competitors. So that's the perfect recipe for disaster for these virtual events companies that have been overvalued now have to justify valuations, and that's why the layoffs. So more layoffs on the way, I would say, more sort of mergers and acquisition. But what is happening on virtual? Nothing much is happening on virtual. And that's the problem, I feel, as well. Like, have you seen any platform with like incredible sort of features or new development? No, they're essentially stayed like they are. I just did a round of 6 demos for a client that I'm working on for 100,000 people on a virtual event. And like, Yeah, I was surprised to see it's exactly like 2020, 2021. So how do you expect it to be better? That's my question. How is
Yeah.
it going to get better? And that's a problem they need to fix. Probably AI can be a solution to them at this
Yeah, no,
stage.
there's so much you just touched on there. Yeah, I'll try and simplify as well. I think, from what we've seen from both SaaStr and some of our sponsors' perspective, like it worked. I mean, listen, our workshop Wednesday is a perfect example of this. It's funny because internally we're like, we don't call it a webinar, but it's also like it kind of is actually its own mini virtual event, which is really funny because this is at the start of the year where our CEO Jason Lumpkin was like, we should do like a workshop Wednesday of like, we have all these great speakers in the SaaStr ecosystem. And like, to your point at in-person events, I know you've tweeted about this as well. There's so much content, right? And for SaaStr, we have so much content, so much great content at our events, so many great speakers that we can't slot everyone. There's only so many slots. There's only so many days. Like we were like, how do we get more of this out there? But maybe not the same thing we were doing with our virtual mega events of like, let's just get them all into one day. We're going to do a bunch of tracks virtually, line them all up, whatever. We're like, how can we just do it maybe a little bit better? So there's not as much of a drop off, right? Because we definitely saw a drop off too. And so we came up with this, okay, let's just basically hack a Zoom meeting, right? A large meeting instead of a webinar so that everyone can see each other. It's a bit more of the community element. And we're like, we'll just bring some of the best speakers of like, if there was somebody who wasn't on the main stage that you might have missed, if there's somebody who had a super niche topic that we think is super topical to the audience, like we literally had Tomas Tungus yesterday talking about AI. Like, I mean, he is a SaaStr super fan. It's funny because now it's turned into this thing where like some of our top speakers are like, I want to do Workshop Wednesday. And we were like, oh, we actually started it for like folks who either weren't on the main stage or like we're new voices. And it's funny that now some of our main stage and like SaaStr fan fave speakers are doing this. And it's become a whole thing. Like we just crossed, I think, 2,000 signups for Workshop Wednesday. We literally do them every Wednesday. And it's funny because like I'll be on the webinar and we'll be like pointing out like, oh, this person comes like, oh, Ajay comes every week. Leah comes every week. Massimo comes every week. We're like, these people literally come every week to Workshop Wednesday. We see their faces. So it was hilariously yesterday, Tomas like knew a bunch of people in the audience. So like he was like interacting with folks. Like it was super fun. And it's funny because we wouldn't have thought about it, in last year, but it was kind of a forced element of like, okay, virtual is not totally dead. I agree with you. I think, you kind of have to hack a platform the best you can because nothing's been innovated. And just because Workshop Wednesday has worked for SaaStr doesn't mean like the same format would work for someone else, right? Like we've got a great engine of folks where we're like booked out through, I think, July of like speakers. Like it was really easy for us to do that and slot that because again, we have so many people that we want to slot on the in-person events that we can't always slot. And so we started slotting them virtually. I'm like, Workshop Wednesday is literally a virtual event every Wednesday. Like, and it's crazy because I was skeptical, the speaker team was skeptical, and Jason was like, no, it's gonna work. And actually it has worked, right? So it's like if you I think nail the goals of it for doing something virtual, it can still work, right? Like it's just funny that it's
Yeah.
I think
I want
most
to add
people have written
something
it
to
off.
that. I want to add something to that
Yeah.
because you make me think about probably the leading topic here as well for everybody in terms of what's the role of events going forward in the marketing mix.
Yeah.
Whether you plan them, whether you attend them, or you sponsor them, right? What is happening around us with ChatGPT and sort of the constant run to repurpose and be efficient in your marketing communication? The result of that is going to be a lot of standardization of content where essentially all the white papers, all the blog posts are going to look the same or they're going to have the kind of same approach. Events, virtual or in person, remain the most personal touch point that you're going to have, where you can actually talk to people. And this is being done live. And there's no chat GPT that we can add to this. You know what I mean? Like we can prepare with it,
Yeah.
maybe, but
Yeah.
we're still going to add a human element to that. And a lot of people want that connection. So whether you do it virtual or in person, obviously in person being the best format of it,
Yeah.
that's valuable.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I was like trying to summarize why it was working, and I think you nailed it, right? It's like the reason why the workshop Wednesday works or like Europa works, I'm like, people like to, well, one, they like to see each other's teams. I feel like that's, you know, a post-pandemic staple now of like, I sometimes don't see all of our team either as often unless I'm at our own events. But yeah, I think that's part of it. But yeah, that in-person connection, it's you've exactly nailed it on the head, right? It's like even on Workshop Wednesday, some of the people have gotten to know each other on Workshop Wednesday because they're like, oh, I saw you here the last couple of weeks. Yeah, whether it's virtual or in person, like it's that connection. And like the chat was like crazy good yesterday. I was like, it's nice that you know, that people still want that. And I think you've nailed it. Like that part of it is not going away. So like no matter for those who want to, you know, again, for our sponsors to do their own events, or if you're thinking about how to, you know, make the most out of SaaStr, that is why people come to these just events in general, right? It's connections, it's meeting people. It's also for buying. So this is a perfect layup to my next slide. We talked about this a little bit pre-webinar. I know our team and our exhibitors, our sponsors have definitely seen this of like a lot of the change around some of the event attendance, especially in person, has been that the in-person deal has made a comeback. And so I love that you tweeted this because we're on a Zoom right now. Like, you know, we all love using Zoom, but that in-person human element is so different when you meet someone face to face. And I like our sales team has become a big proponent of this, right? Of like, they'll get on airplanes now, they'll go meet you, like whatever it takes to get the deal done in person. We go to other events, we have people come to SaaStr. Like it's so crazy true that the in-person deal is making a comeback. Like I think that's such a big reason now of like why people go to shows. So like what do you want to, I know we've already kind of talked about this, but anything you want to add on this? Because I do think it's so true. And like we've seen this a lot.
I mean, you think it's so true because my source on this is probably riffing off of Jason's sort of thoughts on this, right? So I can't clear, you know, he's been saying, I was thinking about something that he was saying during the pandemic in terms of like, you know, VCs are doing deals over Zoom and this is the new reality, right? So they stuck with me quite a lot. Then I was reconciling that thought with the fact that like large trade shows, trade show groups are either experiencing the best years ever or are like being acquired like crazy. And that, you know, if you think about trade shows, there's no, I mean, yes, there's content, but like content is like, you know, an activation is not the core why you go there. So, you know, that made me think like, okay, business driven events are, you know, this is deal making at trade shows is what it's all about. And in this confusion that we're all living in, sort of like narrowing it down, filtering it down to in person is where it's at. And people see the value of it. And obviously then we had a conversation where you were saying, listen, like, you know, people come to SaaStr because we select the best founders, the best startups to invest in, and they know, and they just this is what they want, and so they know that they're gonna go there and find a curated experience for them. Same with trade shows. Like if you can't afford to be at a trade show, you can afford to do business today. That shows in the market. So I feel that that's what a lot of tech companies have to ask themselves. If you don't show up at SaaStr this year, what's your perception going to be? Well, what are you going to miss out on? You know, what marketing are you cutting? Are you cutting the most important part of your marketing? Because like Google Ads, I mean, is that what you're doing? You know, that's tough, right?
Yeah, no, I get it. It's no, it's tough, especially now with all, you know, all the, we could do a whole other webinar on all the cookie stuff and marketing, you know, it's all going away now. So it's like, all right, well, your ads are not going to be the magic they used to be. But also, yeah, I mean, ads are 100% virtual, right? Like it's outside of billboards or like some of the branding that people do at, you know, these events like SaaStr, like it's all digital. It's there and then it's gone. So it's hard to be sticky in that sort of sense. And no, I think it's just crazy what we've seen on the in-person deals. I think, you know, from our sales team side and also a lot of the investors that we've been chatting with, it's funny, like almost every VC fund I've chatted with that's coming to Europa, and there's literally there's hundreds of VCs coming to Europe, but we were like, there's almost too many. I think I said this to you. I was like,
See,
there's
like,
almost too
what
many.
event has too many
Yeah.
VCs? Come on, like,
Yeah, I
like
know.
this is like what people are like. You can't like. I have nothing to sell. I haven't started a startup yet, and I want to go. You know what I mean? Like just to be in that room. That's what events are all about, right? And FOMO is back with a vengeance, right? It's like there was no FOMO during the virtual pandemic. Like every event was free, attend everything, like be there, fantastic, very inclusive, but FOMO was gone. And now it's like coming back with a vengeance where like you want to be there. I mean, literally speaking at an event on April 26th, and there's an AI meetup I want to be at in San Francisco. I'm having this major FOMO. I cannot be there. It's excruciating.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you care about your community, you just want to show up now.
Yeah. No, I think that's yeah, no, I'm so glad you've done this with us because I think there's just so much we're seeing. I'm gonna go forward one slide. Hold on. So this one, I think this touches a bit upon what we're talking about too, is like you've tweeted about this. We've internalized this and we're actually making changes to our Europa event to see how it goes to then implement it at annual because Europa is at scale but still a hint smaller than the annual. Networking. We talked about deal flow, right? We talked about making deals. The in-person deal is back. Dude, the networking is, I can't tell you how many sponsors attendees are like, what are you guys doing more for networking this year? Because like, that's literally that's either my main reason, or that's like one of my, like, I want to go see Bill from Braves, but then I want to go do networking. Like networking is like it's back as the buzzword, I would say.
Oh my God, yeah, absolutely. And also, there's those events that are doing better. They're being very intentional about the networking. It's like having 100
Yeah.
VCs in a room, it's not enough anymore, right? You have to structure
Yeah,
all of that
totally.
goodness. You cannot leave it to alcohol to sort of negotiate what's gonna happen to the room, right? It's event plug good events are very intentional about their networking proposition because
Yeah.
that means having structured one-to-one meetings, curated concierge type matching, even AI matching to larger events, obviously, where you cannot
Mhm.
do it manually. The brain dates that you use so successfully,
Yeah.
great app to do that. But like, being intentional about networking because that's becoming part of justifying the attendance, right? So if you have like a justify your attendance, sort of these are the top reason type of template that you have to share with your boss, to go back, one of those templates that you can download on the website. It used to be all about content. So it used to be all like great
Yeah.
education and learning and great speakers, and I earn credits for whatever continuing education. Now it's moving towards networking. So I have to justify to my boss that I'll be able to attend 10 meetings like Shop Talk or FinTech Meetup we were talking about, right? 10 meetings, I can buy them actually as part of my ticket. And it's guaranteed that I'm going to be doing business while I'm there. I'm not just going to enjoy Vegas or London or whatever and
Sure.
the beauties that come
Mhm.
with it.
Yeah, no, I think it's, for us on the organization side, we've had to be so intentful about this of like, we literally had, we do these brain dates now I would say fairly well at SaaStr of like, we do these super brain dates, which I think we only do at SaaStr, which is like kind of like larger brain dates. We do kind of a different style of how they do one-on-ones and like the small groups. And then for London, we were like, okay, we got to even take it to a bigger, like next level. Cause I was like, we've got to your point, I was like, we've got to innovate a little bit more on the networking. Because I think a lot of folks who've been in SaaStr previously, like they always really love it and they like to participate in it. But I was like, I want to keep it fresh for them too, right? If you've been an annual, if you've been to Europa, I want to make sure you have a new experience in networking, that you meet someone new. It's always our goal that, you have at least one great meeting at SaaStr, go to a great session, meet some great folks. And so we literally circled up with our speaker team and we're implementing this. You'll see it in the next couple of weeks on the Europa agenda, but we're doing
Wow.
literally a
So
networking power
curious
hour
now.
where we're going to try and, yeah, we're going to do this networking power hour where we try and slot everybody into at least, again, a meeting or two across the 2 days and get everyone to just like do a meeting. And so it's it's interesting because again, and we do our Meet a VC program on like the second day more formally. And so there's a lot of matchmaking I think we're doing now on our side of like, okay, if you're a founder coming, if you're a VC coming, like we're going to make sure you get as many meetings as you can via that. We've always done the Meet a VC program, but I think we'll probably have more applications than we did ever before. I'm like, it's about to open, and I'm like so curious to see how many people apply now.
It's value.
Yeah, we do
There's
that, but yeah,
value.
we were also like, yeah, for the general audience, we're like, okay, we're going to do this networking power hour and trying to like get everyone to do a brain date, do a one-on-one brain date, do a meeting. And because again, it's to your point, like if you can go back to your team and say that you did that, it's going to make you feel really good about the ROI. Because I know ROIs, we could do a whole another webinar on it, but like ROI is always really tricky on events. So I think to your point, anecdotally, right? If you can go to something like a ShopTalk or a SaaStr and say, okay, I had these like whatever 3 to 5 meetings, like I'm feeling good about it, like even that helps.
Oh my God, yeah. And you got to be intentional how you show up as a sponsor as well. We never touch on that.
Agreed.
But like, you'd be amazed at how many sponsors they show up, they collect leads, they don't even follow up. They send like, poor emails. So that's a lot of opportunity that you lose instantly, essentially. So even being creative, I think there's like threads on Twitter of people that showed up at SaaStr, like with their old strategy and like how they did it and like turned over like millions in funnel. Like you have to show up with creativity as well. It's not about just sitting there. This is like very common in SaaS. Is a criticism that the wider event industry does to the SaaS, to the tech specifically, because there's a lot of reps that are just sitting around, just being there, like just not being active and actively engaging, expecting like an online inbound type of situation. No, it doesn't happen like that.
Right.
Like you got to be active, you got to
Right.
be out there, you got to be proactive with follow up as well.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm always amazed when I go to other people's events to see how many people come up to me. I'm like, let's just see. I'm like, I'll count. I think it was less than 5 at ShopTalk, right? So it's really funny. I mean, not haha funny, but like it is interesting that at events that are at scale, it's a good point you make. Like the effort has to be from your team, right? Like as much as we as the organizers try and manufacture a lot of this to be traffic, like we put our sponsor hall in the most highly trafficked areas of the show, like you still got to entice those people to come into your booth, right? It's like get them in, and then also what are you going to do with them, right? Yeah, what are you going to do with those leads?
Connect before, like send them messages, like, are you hosting a party? Invite them to the party. Nobody wants to come to your booth, but they want to go to a party. You know what I mean? Like, be strategic about that. And the satellites of events that are happening around SaaStr, that's becoming part of the community and experience. So if you can leverage that, you're gonna have a lot of advantage.
Yeah, 100%. You've touched on this already. I'll link it for those in like the follow up here. But I know Jason's written a whole article about this. It's like events are worth the big expense. But I think just to summarize on event attendance, right? We said this kind of earlier, but you've absolutely nailed it. Of like, people are going to the top events of their industry, and they're doing more of their like smaller dinners, right? They're doing more smaller meetups, smaller dinners, smaller one-on-one meetings, face to face, because that again, those relationships, that networking, that face to face is harder to do on the Zoom. Not that you can't do it, as we've said, but it's much harder to do.
Yeah.
I want to talk about this real quick before we wrap, because I think it's helpful for our audience to know. We've seen this a lot. You've chatted about this a lot. Event costs are really crazy right now. Like, I think no matter if you're just attending, right? And like the food around the area is more expensive. Hotels are more expensive. Flights are more expensive. Like that's just to attend. Then if you sponsor, right? It's more expensive from a sponsorship perspective because of all those reasons of like you have maybe 10 people from your team you're sending. And so that's way more in flight costs, right? That's way more in rooming costs. That's way more in per diems and swag. Swag is more expensive. Swag's actually harder to get these days. Like there's a lot of supply chain issues globally. Event costs have just gone up, I think, everywhere. And then especially for the producers, and hosts of these events, I can't even tell you how, our costs. Yeah, 16% is maybe a rough rule. I've seen some categories be more than that. I've seen other categories be less than that. That's probably a good average. But basically everything's gotten more expensive. And so we've had to be super creative on like how we tackle inflation, but like just help the folks here on the
Yeah,
call if they're trying to do their own events as well outside of SaaStr, like what they should know about this and how to be mindful of
yeah.
it, because I do think it's affecting everyone right now.
So I'll be honest with you. Last year when there was like talk about like inflation going super up and a recession coming, I was like, oh my God, I came off of like 2008 and whatever happened during the last crisis.
Yeah.
Events are the first to go. Events are like the first to go. They get axed from
Yeah.
budgets and all of that. Yet what we're witnessing right now, it's like shocking to me, having commented on this for like 15 years. It's still hospitality is like doesn't care. People still want to travel, still want to go out, despite whatever is happening all around. They want to attend events, they want to travel and go places. So keep that in mind because you have to take advantage of that sort of trend that is happening within sort of the doom of macroeconomic environment that we're living in. So I feel it's very important to be intentional about how you maximize that need to attend in person, right? That means stepping up your offering to incorporate like VIP experiences, like and higher ticket prices. Because like at the end of the day, you gotta have that 15 to 45 to 70% increase in cost, for staffing and stuff like that. It's just out of control if you're able to find a venue that is, because some venues are booked out up until 2025 or whatever.
That's true, actually. Yeah.
Right? It's shocking, right? It's
It is
so
shocking. Yeah.
counterintuitive, but it's happening. So, you have to maximize the revenue opportunity there that you have that you may be losing with some sponsors that are sort of dropping off. You have to transfer that balance over to the wanting to attend that the attendees have. So higher prices, of course, tickets, different layers with higher prices. Obviously, try to be inclusive, but like also bear in mind, you have to cater for those that can spend more. So VIP experiences sometimes is just about, putting a rope next to a line, and then all of a sudden you have 10% more revenue out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So being strategic and
Yeah.
thinking, how can I maximize that opportunity is very important. I actually have a LinkedIn thread that I'm going to share just about that, about like maximizing that, and Twitter thread as well, that I created out of our conversation, because I feel, that's the only thing you can do. Because if sponsors is
Yeah.
kind of like on the fence, attendees is where you need to push it. If you have a lot of demand, it's a rule of elasticity. You have to push it up and make it,
Totally.
make it
Totally.
better for you.
Yeah, no, it's been an interesting year, and I'm so glad we did this at like just the beginning of Q2. We'll have to do it again at the end of the year, or maybe even in the mid. But yeah, it's just such an interesting time because to your point, right? Like there's not a lot of data yet about 2023 events because most of it is 6 months back. So it's from the end of 2022 where like, yeah, events were still doing pretty well. Inflation was just starting to creep in, like it wasn't as dramatic. So it'll be interesting to see how all the data shifts and how it all nets out. Because yeah, I mean, to your point, it is crazy to find a venue. Like we're lucky in the fact that like I think we booked Tobacco Dog crazy early, and so we were lucky there. And like once San Mateo, where we do the big annual, like I think I've held dates for like 20 years with them. So like I got it early. But yeah, it's crazy if you try like even for some of the smaller stuff we try to do, like smaller VIP events around our larger events or even just dinners. Like it's our Poi on our sales team was trying to do a dinner a couple of weeks ago, and he's like I think I found like one restaurant that would do it. Like everyone else is
Wow.
booked full, like crazy. Yeah, crazy capacity constraints, even though everything is more expensive, right? There's just more events in general, like even with booking, especially I think for smaller venues, as much as the big ones. I almost think it's worse on the smaller venues because there's just more people back to reality, right? Like when we were in Singapore, I think the hotel we stayed at had a wedding or two every single day, right? And you've got to think all these people probably postponed their weddings from the last couple of years, and now there's like a ton of weddings happening. So it's like not only are you competing with each other for like event space, like you're competing with normal people too, right? Like they're gonna try and get that hotel, they're gonna try
Yeah.
and get that cool venue. Like
I mean,
it's crazy.
the week you were in Vegas for Shop Talk, there was Shop Talk, Transform HR, there was Sting, there
Yep.
was Taylor Swift. Like in a week,
WWE.
yeah,
Yeah.
like Vegas had the busiest February ever. Like not post
Ever.
pandemic, pre pandemic ever. So
Yeah,
this is
ever.
like a
Yeah.
trend you have to rely sort of take advantage of. One tip if you plan larger events, but even like any type of event that is like bigger than 200 people, maybe use your CVB, right? So the convention bureau of your local convention bureau or destination. So the Visit, whatever, Visit San
Yeah.
Mateo, Visit California, and all of those, they can give you the relationships. So if you don't have relationships that you've developed through the years with Tobacco Dog and San Mateo and the likes, you can rely on these people and say, listen, I'm bringing a group, like it's a great group. What can you offer me? Can you help me get a better deal? Can you help me with the local suppliers to get discounts? So working with this is all free, by the way. So you should definitely leverage all of this.
Yeah, no, that's a great tip for folks who are planning their own events. Maybe we'll wrap on this because I think we've touched on it a little bit again. We'll see how the data nets out in the next few months. But I know, historically, B2B SaaS tech marketers spend big on events. We just wrote we just threw up an article, I think yesterday, about like, should you really cut your long tail things like events? And, to your point, if you were saying earlier, maybe cut ads instead because the ROI can be so much higher on events when you do them right. But just like, yeah, any parting words of wisdom on, events, ROI, like what do you want to leave our SaaStr community with?
So yeah, there's no question. A lot of people are resorting to events today as the marketing channel where they filter the noise, they find relevant people. Whatever the mess that is happening on social networks, the changes that we're experiencing right now, the costs of ads that are going up. Either you own an audience and you're able to connect with them, and virtual is
Yeah.
still a good channel to do that. Don't discard virtual, especially if you don't have the budget to show up for your own events and do your annual meeting. Do it virtually, but be intentional about it. Consider that we're all sort of Zoom fatigued for life for the next 10 years. So you got to make it like incredibly exciting. Otherwise, we're just going to fall asleep and go somewhere else, right? So, but also like don't assume that you're going to show up at SaaStr and money is going to walk to you and you're going to go back rich. That's not going to happen, right? You gotta be super intentional on how you show up. There's gonna be people that are very hungry to be there, and found the budget. So whenever you show up at events, you gotta be at the top of your game. Pick the people that are natural with this, like they don't need instructions on how to deal with other people. It's the human element more than the sales capability. So important in this environment. So show up with the right people and with a plan. Show up with a message.
Yeah.
Like, what's your message? Like people show up at a booth and like there's coffee making and the cocktail shaker. Yeah, but what's your message? Like, what do you do other than that? Which is nice and we all enjoy that. But yeah, I mean, having a message and intention on how you show up, one key message with your booth, and like align all your team around it, and you'll see that magic is going to happen.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of when, again, we go to other events, even at our events, when I see booths with like one clear tagline, like again, it is your billboard during, SaaStr, during whatever it is that you're at. Like what, to Julius's point, I think doing activations helps draw people in, but then what do you want to say to them, right? Like what is your one clear message? And I think anything you can do to say how you're going to help other founders, other SaaS marketers, other CEOs, like that is what people want to hear. That's what they want to see. That is when they will have a conversation with you. Oh, you help manage spend. How can I do that? Everyone needs spend management right now, right? Like who doesn't? Like if you could save an hour on everyone's spend management and that's your tagline, people are going to gravitate to you and have a conversation, right? And I think to Julius's point, it's like sending the right people at the booth, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it's your rep. It might even be, your VPM or your CMO or your CEO, like just talking to folks about how you've had this problem and how you solved for it. Like we all have the same issues. So I think that's a really good
Yeah, and
good
show up
point
with
to end it
content
on.
as well. I would say show up with
Yes.
content. Like if you're able to find slots and opportunity with content at SaaStr or other events, do it. Do it at your booth if you can. If you have like a large one, do content there. Because people want your content in that format. Like you gotta have undivided attention. We did it together, right? When we did interviews at our booth when we were
Yeah.
at Hopin. So,
Yeah, that was so fun.
right? And we used that content. We should have used it better, but we repurposed the hell out of it, right? It becomes like
Yeah.
events are an incredible opportunity to generate content for the future as well.
Yeah, no, but agreed. I think, to your point, there's a lot of our sponsors who've done this really well, like doing a full write-up, doing live blogs, doing their takeaways from sessions they've seen. There's a ton of networking, there's a ton of content. But I think this has been really great parting advice. So I know we're at the 45-minute mark already, and you've been so gracious with your time to give us all your insights on events and SaaS and technology. So if folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way they can do that?
For sure. To Julius on Twitter. I'm usually there with Jason chatting back and forth. So you'll see me in the comments there if you don't want to be bothered with searching up for me. Or, LinkedIn is my main social network. So I post there daily. So you'll find my ramblings about events and event tech and the trends of where this thing is going.
Well, Julius, thank you so much for doing this. I'm sure we will have you back. This has been so nice to get your insights to help us think about things, to help all of our community think about events just as a whole. And hopefully you'll come to London. I was like, you should come to London. So if you've got the time, if not, I'll see you at Annual.
We'll see what
But I'm sure
happens.
we'll do this again. So yeah,
Thanks for having me.
Thanks again so much. We appreciate it.